You are now entering the spoiler zone. The following podcast contains explicit plot details and pockets of profanity. You have been warned. The Exton Moss Experiment. Adventures in Wine and Space with Simon Exton and Ken Moss. Hello everyone, I'm Ken Moss, and a very warm welcome to the Exton Moss Experiment. This time we're delving into our own archives and sharing interviews that we've recorded over the years at fan events, in the first of a new series of occasional episodes called Conventionally Speaking. This is an interview with Robert Shearman, recorded at the Cavern Club in Liverpool on the 30th of April 2006. The event was called Who at the Cavern, organised by fans like us, the We're All Doctor Who group, and the interviewer was Brian Gorman.
Right, sorry, you are... I don't even know who I am. It's Sunday morning. I mean, God, I'm
a serious traveller in time.
About 3 p.m. I know who I am.
Okay, right. Rob, you're a writer. So, when you were a little Robette,
yes,
watching Doctor Who on telly,
yeah.
What did you think? Did you think one day I want to write for that, or did you think one day I want to act in it? So I'm crap at acting, so I'll write.
I did want to be an actor actually, but I was rubbish. And I joined the National Youth Theatre, and they really helped because I can't say my L's and my R's very well, and I have a bit of a stammer. So they said that I would be the worst actor in the world, and I concurred. And I thought, well, I better be a writer then.
Can you say some good?
Sorry,
I'm taking the mic.
I can't sing it's like lullaby or lollipop. You can hear I can't do it, because the L's are rubbish. So I thought I better be a writer because I still love the idea of being in the theatre and things.
Yeah.
But no, when I was watching Doctor Who, I was back at my parents and I found this synopsis I'd written when I was 13 to write a Sontaran on Gallifrey story.
Right.
And it's rubbish. but actually no worse than anything else I've ever written, so I probably ought to have given that to Russell.
But are you your own worst critic though? You say it's rubbish,
well,
sure it's somebody else.
I would like to believe I was, but actually I've read some stuff. I have had some dreadful critics in newspapers in my time. I had a play that was meant to go into the West End, and it was called A Low-Brow Ball by the Times. It never got there, and that was probably mine. So I think Kate Bassett's my worst critic from the Independent.
You've got a list of them, have you?
Yeah. I did actually want to write a play once, which you'd have to review, called Kate Bassett is a Cow. Except the word cow wasn't going to be the word. But then
similar spellings.
Possibly be theatrical suicide, and he would still write me a bad review, and it wouldn't really be a very sensible idea. But no, I'm a fairly bad critic of my own work. I mean, it's difficult, and you can't relax with it. I mean, I've seen Dalek a few times, but only because I have to.
Because you have to. You're probably sick of it now.
Well, I've done a few live commentaries and things, that conventions and things, and so I won't watch it otherwise. I just have to watch it and talk over it, and it's quite funny.
How did you first get into writing for Doctor Who? Was it the Big Finish stuff, or was it the fanzine stuff?
I did a fanzine when I was a kid, but I never wrote fiction. What I wrote was just awful, badly written reviews of Peter Davison stories that were on at the time, which I just told the story and just said, no, I didn't like it at the end of it. It was a really crap fanzine, actually. You can see it on eBay, it's called Cloister Bell, and it's rubbish. And I was dreadful. I write reviews of things I've never even seen, which was quite common at the time. I remember writing a review of The Smugglers that was broadcast 4 years before I was born, and is obviously not in the archive. So I don't know how I wrote a review of it. I think I based it upon the paragraph in the Jean-Marc Officier programme guide. They said, it's probably boring.
Secrets coming out here.
So, yeah.
So when did you decide to kind of move into fiction then? Did you just think, I'll just give it a go?
I just began writing drama in the 80s, and I was mainly a theatre writer, and I moved into radio and then into television. But Doctor Who was never something I took particularly seriously until, Big Finish one day gave me a call and said, would I write for this new audio range? And Virgin had asked me to write a book for them, but I said no, because I can't write prose very well. So I've never been able to get a novel out. But I thought, well, I could probably write an audio drama. So I wrote a few of those, and I think that's, well, I know that's what got me the TV series. Was that one day, actually, it was one of those really weird things, because when the new series was announced, I'd never dreamt, I was just pleased it was back, being a fan. I thought, great, I'll be able to watch it.
So did you kind of pitch yourself? Did you kind of write in and say, hey,
no,
I like Doctor Who,
it's a strange thing. I just changed agents, and I'd been working for the last 6 months on this dreadful BBC series called Born and Bred, which I hope you've never seen, but has now been cancelled, which is such a shame, because it was such a fun show to work on. And I had said to my agent when I just joined her, I said, I'm never going to do serious television again. I'll never write for a television show which I'm not creating. And then Doctor Who came back, and I had this phone call from her. I was on a bus in London, and she just said, look, I've had this call for you to do on a show. And I said, I don't want to do them. And she said, well, I've sort of told them probably no, but it's something called Doctor Who. And I said, yeah? She said, apparently you're writing, I think you might want to do it actually, because they're getting some good writers on board, and it's episode 6 you're doing, and you're bringing back the Daleks. And I said, yeah, right. I was on the bus, and I said, and you said no. And she said, well, I've told them probably not. And I said, no. I said, give them a call anyway. And because I was, and I wanted to dance down the arse of the bus, but they arrested me for that. So that's a thing that I really thought that I wouldn't, I mean, the other thing was that the first time I ever met Russell and Julie and Phil and Helen was at that first meeting, after we'd been commissioned. So I had this awful thing, I'd go into the meeting, they'd say, oh, no, I didn't mean you. And they'd say, no.
The other Rock Shearman.
But no, I never dreamt of pitching, because I never thought I'd get it. It was that odd thing that, and also no one could pitch, and no one still can pitch. I mean, Russell will give you a call and say, right, it's time for your Dalek story.
So your work just spoke for itself then? Somebody just saw it and thought, wow, that's...
Yeah, and again, that's also the worries that normally in TV, you go for tons of meetings because people can't stand the idea of working for you as, in a small room in the BBC for 9 months if they can't, if they're not going to get on with you, it's going to be horrible. So normally you go through meeting after meeting after meeting in which you try and persuade them that you're not actually either someone who can't write or a gid. And then they would say, all right, you can write for our series then. But I was already commissioned before I met any of them. And that's actually quite frightening, because you go and meet Russell, who's this 6'7" Camp Welshman, and he just hugs you. And you think, well, if I now just push you as a get off, you can't get rid of me. Actually, they probably could have sacked me.
Maybe.
But they did.
Seems pretty powerful, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's a big presence, Russell.
Is he like
overwhelming, actually?
Is he anything like his image? He's got some big camp guy, fun and all that, or is he right?
That's all Russell is. He's just a big camp guy who likes Doctor Who.
That's all he is.
And he's not here. So,
I think we'd know if he was here, wouldn't we?
Well, the thing about Russell, I've still got his texts on my mobile and his emails because, being a Doctor Who fan, you think, I'm not going to ever lose those, so you keep them. But they sound like the way he is on television. He goes, hooray! Exclamation marks, marvellous! That whole first meeting with Russell and Julie and Phil was basically saying, you've got people like the Daleks! And then he started cracking you. You think, yeah, I know. And because I'm from London, I said, yeah.
They're like rubber balls or something.
Yeah. Well, they're also big and Welsh. And all of them are just bouncing off the wall. You just say, yeah, Daleks.
And you're standing there going, yeah, all right,
yes, I think I'll do that for you. And I think that they were a bit concerned I was a little bit taking it too much in my stride. I wasn't going, yes, because I'm from Surrey. I can't do that.
That's okay. Don't worry.
Everybody in Wales is like that. I mean,
are they?
Yeah, actually, it's the weirdest thing. You would go to the BBC and you'd have meetings in London and in Cardiff. And in London, you'd go up to reception and you'd say, hello, I'm here for a Doctor Who meeting. They'd go, no, you're not. And you'd say, I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think there's a meeting today. I said, no, there is. They said, yeah, like there is, really. You can't. Could you leave the building? I mean, seriously, I got that. And I said, no, I've really got a meeting. I said, no, there's nothing down. Could you leave, please? And they thought I was an extra from Casualty. Seriously, they thought I was actually trying to get a really side audition for Casualty. They said that. They said, well, the extras for Casualty, mate, are over there. Don't try any of this, because we've had this from the morning. I said, no, I'm writing a Dalek story. They said, don't care, mate. You get a car television programmes. They hadn't before. You go into the, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but they,
No, you shouldn't.
you go into BBC Wales and they go, hello, at reception. You say, hello. Are you really? You're doing your do? Well done, marvellous. Hooray for you. Yeah, right. I say, have you really a meeting? Or what? The third floor? I'll give them a call. How exciting! And everything's exciting for them. And you get in the lift at BBC Wales, and the head of BBC Wales has got his daughter to do the lift announcements. And so it says in Welsh and in English, third floor. You think, what the hell? And then you wouldn't get that in BBC London because they just say, don't care. But I was just so excited all the time.
You've probably employed half the country, haven't you? The new series.
Yeah, well, but they're so excitable. I mean, it's like they've never even seen a television before. They go, oh, there's a box and pictures come out. So, I mean, it was the most fun because they were all, I mean, even if you go to a meeting which they basically just said, your script's rubbish, hooray! It was always inspiring because Russell was always happy. I mean, he always made you feel, even if he was saying, even if when they said to you things like, guess what? We've lost the Daleks. Do a new episode. Hooray! They made you feel quite good about it. Like it was a positive achievement. That actually, there had been this script. Back to the drawing board. That'll be fun, won't it? It'll be an opportunity for you. So, yeah. Thanks. That is good, isn't it? And they'd say, yes, it is. And so, you'd always be cheerful.
What restrictions did they place on you when you knew you had the episode of Dalek, you knew the Daleks were in it?
Yeah.
Were there specific things you were told you cannot do?
No. In fact, that was part of the difficulty, is that, because we had all heard rumours, but when they did Randall and Hot Deceased a few years ago, there was this big problem because it was going out at 7 p.m. as well. And you can't show death. That was a new BBC guideline. They don't want death on the screen willy-nilly. And I was concerned because I thought, well, I'm doing this Dalek story and it's not going to kill anybody, it's going to maim them or something. And they said, no, try it. But every draft you would give, they would say things like, we could probably put a bit more horror in after my first draft. I said, great. So I went away my second draft and I killed everybody. And in fact, that whole sequence, because I had right from the beginning, I wanted to have that sink plunger thing but it wasn't. It was much more graphic than that, the version I wrote, and it was
bloody scary, that bit.
But it was the plunger went out, and the rubber enveloped his head, and it grew over his head, and it picked him up still screaming, and threw him around a bit, threw him against the wall. He fell down. His face had burnt off to a skull. And this was draft 2. This draft 1, I just didn't put any death in, and Russell just said, what are you doing to my show? I said, I don't know. He said, more. He said, not this. So it was fun to sort of go back and forth with it. I mean, it was, we really didn't know, and that's the hardest thing about it, because at least now they do know Series 2 and Series 3. We didn't know who it was for. I mean, you go to different meetings and, they'd sometimes say, well, we don't know, maybe it's for 8-year-olds. And then they'd say, no, actually it's for adults. And so you try and redress your draft according to how people in the meeting spoke to you last time.
The finished version was pretty graphic, I thought.
And actually it really worried me, because, I was watching Aliens of Quantum and World War III. In fact, I'd seen them, but Dalek had just been made. And I just thought, I've got this completely wrong. I mean, they have made Dalek now, so they can't change it, but I just thought this is the wrong tone. But I don't think we ever really knew what the tone was, and I think that I got a bit scared therefore, when in that week building up to Dalek, I just thought, what if the audience just say that isn't actually what we've been led to believe that the show is?
Yeah.
But then Stephen Moffat came over to my house the night Dalek aired with a video of Empty Child, and we watched it together. And Stephen actually went white. He just said, I've gone too far. This was the scene where with Richard Wilson.
Yeah.
And he said, I wouldn't let my kids watch that. And it was that sort of awkward thing about not really knowing how far.
Yeah.
But Russell just said, go away and write an episode. I mean, it really was very much a clean slate. And then they'd give you notes. But there were no restrictions. I mean, I was told to introduce Adam, that loser companion. And I was told to bring back the dice and base it on Jubilee. But I could do pretty much whatever I wanted within that.
Were you told just to have one Dalek?
Well, that was always the commission.
Was that deliberate?
But that was because I'd done that in the Jubilee Big Finish audio, and they commissioned me because they wanted me to adapt that. They thought it was very clever that, because they knew they were coming back en masse at the end of the series, obviously, they said, let's set it up so the introductory story has this one final Dalek, and we'll make them believe that's the last one. And I said, yeah, great. So there was always going to just be one Dalek.
And you got to go down on the set and actually meet the Dalek.
Yes, and I hugged it.
Yes, I read about that,
yeah.
In front of people or in a quiet corner.
Well, actually, the thing is that everyone told me to hug it, because they were
They're chaperones.
No, it's that sort of odd thing. You go on the set, and I find as a writer going on the set anyway is quite scary because, well, you don't want actors to come up to you and just say things like, "As has happened, 2 writers I know said these lines are rubbish," and you say, "Oh, right, thank you," because you always feel actually if there are any problems on set, it's because of something you wrote which isn't easy to film.
Yeah.
So every delay seems to be your fault. So I spent only 2 days on. I couldn't take more than 2 days on set because it just makes me nervous. But I went on and the Dalek. I was at university with the chap who was in Sucker Dalek, so he just blowed himself up a few times. It was the scene where it revives and the electricity comes in and it shoots things, and so I had to blow everything up around him. Barney had to wear a sock over his head because otherwise he could be seen through it, and he was scared out of his mind by that. And it was so I went into this room just full of wreckage, and there was this Dalek sitting there, and everyone was cameras and said, "So could you hug it?" And I said, "Yeah, all right."
Go on, might never happen again.
But I did want to, because it was really, I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but actually, this big, robust thing is actually very intimidating.
Well, I used to laugh at them on television, and then we picked up a life-size replica of Dalek for an event a couple of years ago, and I had to have it in my living room for about a week. And it's weird, he's sitting there at 7 o'clock at night, out the corner of your eye. You know?
Yeah, no, it's scary.
Bloody scary.
Yeah, and everybody felt that. I mean, Billy he didn't even know what they were.
So do you want one yourself?
No.
No. Because Russell's got one in his
one in his front room. I mean, I had to. It was actually it was the nastiest thing when we lost the Daleks, and I had about a month to write another episode. I went over to his house in Manchester to chat about it because it was an emergency meeting. And you ring the doorbell, and he opens up the door, and you just have this full-size Dalek. And it was like it was mocking me, saying, "Yeah, not right for me anymore. You've lost the right. Write another monster, you get." And so I kicked it really hard when Russell wasn't looking. But yeah, Russell's got a full-size Dalek. I was sent one of those talkie things, and it scares my cat. Because my cat loves my bedroom. Right. My writing bedroom, the bedroom I write in.
You have a writing bedroom?
Yeah, because I work about 3 or 4 in the morning. If I'm actually really writing hard, then Jane, my wife, says you can use your other bedroom tonight. So and that's where my cat likes to go. So I put the Dalek on top of the wardrobe, and I can press the button if he's in there, and he runs away. It's great. It'd be the equivalent of
yeah, great those talking Daleks, aren't they? Because you can just, if somebody's on the phone you don't like them, you just put the Dalek on the phone.
Yeah.
And
I've never tried doing that, Roman.
Have you not?
No, because
you must try it. Right?
I'm not as
it
nuts
does
as you, but perhaps I'll do that. Yeah.
I think he might be as nuts as me. What do you think? He's a writer. He spends a lot of time in a dark room by himself.
Well, I don't meet people ever. I mean, actually, this is a real. I've never seen so many people in one place before. It's not with only see 1 or 2 people, and they're usually Russell. It's usually big camp.
Well, he is a lot of people in one person.
He's enormous. He's so big. He's 6 foot.
Effusive, that's a good word for him, isn't it?
Yeah, he just doesn't shut up. I mean, it's hard to imagine. Just not shutting up.
I know. Right, so you're on the set, so
yes.
I'm assuming you met Mr. Eccleston.
I've met Chris several times, but not actually doing Dalek.
Right.
Chris, I met him during the Aliens of London Rose stuff.
I suppose what most
people... I met him doing
are...
Empty Charm, but I didn't meet him actually on the Dalek set.
I suppose what most people are really intrigued by now is that he left after 1 season, for whatever reason, fine, he's a working actor. I think a lot of people are really curious now as to where is he, what does he think of being an ex-Doctor Who, and would he ever appear at a convention?
He's a very shy man, as Paul McGann. I think this is that he was quite keen to see it as something. He really threw himself, pardon me, into it for 9 months, and he really tried, and he was very excited by it. But I think it's that odd thing. He doesn't want to intrude upon David, and he feels very much that. And he said to me, I think it's actually the hardest thing for him was that the news of his leaving early leaked so early. And he wrote me an email and he said, the hardest thing is I've been Doctor Who now for 3 days, and that's it. Yeah. Because I was introduced on Saturday, and now it's Tuesday, I'm no longer Doctor Who. And I don't want David, because David was pretty much known at that stage he'd be doing it. I mean, that leaked as well. And he said, I don't want now to spoil David's fun. So once David was announced, and they announced him, when was that? It was shortly after Dalek went out, because I remember at my Dalek press launch, all I was asked about was, are they going to cast David Tennant? And I couldn't say yes, because I I don't know.
It's funny, isn't it? You get
Chris
this
was on BBC.
Christopher Eccleston, who I assume is not a big Doctor Who fan.
No,
He said he never watched it.
He hadn't watched
He's
it.
a kind of very
He watched it
serious
afterwards.
actor.
He has watched it since.
Yeah.
He watched
Yeah.
Hounds of Cheyenne.
Oh, right.
He said, oh, that's what it is. I did that wrong.
Whereas David Tennant is just he loves it.
But
He'll
the thing
play
actually,
the part.
Chris was funny because Chris would try. Chris came up to me at the read-through for Empty Child and said to me, he said, do you know, he said, you know that chap in Mine or Mine, Russell's other series at the time, the dad? I said, John Scott Martin. He said, yeah. And he said, is the grandfather of the guy who played the Dalek voice for us, Nick Briggs. And he did the Dalek voices in the 60s. And I said, no. John Scott Martin was inside the Daleks in the 70s. Peter Hawkins was doing the Dalek voices in the 60s. And Nick Briggs isn't related to him at all. And he said, I'm crap at this, aren't I? I said, yeah. you know nothing, Chris. You know nothing.
Who are you?
It's the hardest thing was he went on to, the first thing he did was BBC Breakfast. And they asked him about once, and he didn't know anything. He remembered the Sontarans vaguely. He'd never really seen it.
He looked very nervous on Jonathan Ross, didn't he? Before the series started, and when he saw the figure of himself, it was real horror in his eyes.
Of course, he already left as well. It's that awful thing. I've already left, and he's a figurine of me.
He was dying to say, "I'm gone, don't do this."
It was hard. I mean, he's not someone. He's an incredibly hard-working actor, but he's an actor, and he likes acting, and he's not one of those people. It's one of those funny things, because my wife's an actress, and there's an assumption from people that if you're an actor, it's because you want attention and you want to be stopped in the street. And Chris is not a man who wants that. Chris wants to act. Chris wants to perform and do a part. And so doing all the publicity stuff for it, I don't think... I mean, he was very happy to do it because he wanted people to watch it, but I don't think it's something that he...
It wasn't kind of enjoying.
I think seeing a model of that is probably...
Yeah, I just remember the look on his face. He was genuinely...
Whereas David loves it.
Oh, yeah.
David, actually, there's a story about David. He's going out now, as you probably know, with Sophia Miles, who's in Girl in the Fireplace. And she went over to his flat soon after they got together. And she saw he's got 2 merchandise, and she said, you should just tell somebody to send some of it back, because he said, no, I had all this before. I was all these DVDs.
They're actually mine.
Yeah. David is as much a fan as anyone in the room.
Yes, totally.
Because I've been there for a few years, and and it's so funny he's the Doctor. I mean, I find that hilarious that he's now playing the Doctor.
I find it bizarre because I remember 2 years ago, I was talking to Gary Russell, and I'm a big fan of the comic book Luther Arkwright. And they'd just done, Big Finish had just done it.
Oh.
And I didn't know who was playing Luther Arkwright, and I said to Gary Russell, so who's playing Luther Arkwright? He goes, it's an actor with David Tennant. I said, who's he? What's he done?
Yeah.
I said, it's really good. I thought, okay. But I saw him in Blackpool in the TV show, and I thought, bloody hell, he'd make a brilliant Doctor.
Well, the thing that David had been this lead RSC National Theatre actor for years, and in fact, actually, the odd thing was, I felt really ashamed about it, because I write at the National, that's what I actually do when I'm writing.
Yeah.
And I bumped into him there, because he knew I like the audio, so we had a chat about the latest Big Finish audio. He said, you must come and see my play on. I said, yeah, I'd love to, and it's off the National, and I went, yeah, it's fun. And he was the lead. And I went to see him, and he's never off the stage for 2.5 hours, and I thought he was probably a spear carrier, because he was a Doctor Who fan, so I just assumed actually
that he had no real life.
That actually, because he does the audio to take any part, because he just happened to do it, I didn't realise he had that sort of status. Yeah. But he's a tremendous, he was Romeo for the RSC.
There's a lot of excellent actors, aren't there, who you never see because, you just need to be showcased in the television. And there was a huge star.
He hadn't done much television. He'd done bits and pieces, but nothing which was that famous. And he just said to me at that stage, I've been offered this thing called Blackpool, I think I'm doing that. And of course, that's actually, that and then Casanova. Yeah.
Right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to throw some questions up to the audience because we're behind schedule. Right, anybody got any questions to Rob? Young man over there.
Hello.
Is there anything you'd like to have seen done differently to how Dalek ended up on screen?
Sort of. But it's that funny thing that, I spent 9 months writing and rewriting Dalek to the point that, if you look at my first draft now, it's got different characters in it, seems to me, and every single time it went through a change, you have to embrace that and move on. And by the time it reached the screen, there were things I would actually quite like from my very first drafts to have ended up in there. It was different storyline things. But you have to let them go. I was just actually relieved that Joe Ahern did such a good job directing it, because The hard part is you hand it over, and you're aware at that point that you have no power at all anymore, and the director and the actors and everybody can do what they want to it. And looking back at I've chatted to one of the writers from the old series. I was able to meet them and chat to them about it, and of course they didn't have those sort of budgets that we had. And I was chatting to Eric Saywood a bit, and he'd say, yeah, it's the difficulty is that he'd have these scripts, and then we'd ruin them. You know, he was talking about the heartbroken, how people would just they'd go on and see the Merca or whatever, and you think, well, that's ruined my story. And of course now, and it still could have done. I mean, I could have just had a really bad luck and it's a very, very bad shoot, but I can watch it now and I can be very proud of it. There are things that, I mean, I probably would have wanted to have had another batch of writing Van Stappen because he began to move away from what I wanted some time before, and I ought to perhaps have. He became a little bit too comic book villain for me by the end, but again, it was that thing that every time you try and build up the characters, quite rightly all the notes would come back saying, yeah, but that means there's less Dalek time, and it's really to bring back the Daleks who are doing this, so could you please let the characters go a bit? You have to just let them be a bit more functional. So, short answer, not really, but a bit, I suppose.
Did you write any scenes that actually weren't in the final edit?
Oh yeah, tons. Things that they actually filmed as well. But Dalek was the first one that actually overran, because every episode that they had made before that underran. The BBC had been so keen to try and save money on it that every single draft you'd get, they would cut and cut and cut and cut down to the bone. And actually they always cut too much. I mean, Stephen Moffat tells a story about how while he was in Australia, they were filming it, they said, do you write a scene now, overnight, but you haven't got any of the actors except for Nancy and you've got the kids. But you can't have the gas mask child, you can't have Doctor and Rose. So he wrote the scene with a typewriter and they'd filmed it the next day because it was going to be 2 minutes short, the episode. Dalek was the first one that, because I always overwrite, they still have too much footage and you didn't miss much. I mean, there was a sequence which actually I think is now a bit silly where when the Dalek downloads the internet, the Doctor comments upon how it's had to wade through thousands of pages of porn and attempts to revive Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it's quite a funny joke, and they were chat about that. And you watch the scene now and you think, no, that really wouldn't have been emotionally right. But I try to put a bit more comedy in because I'm really a comedy writer, and Dalek, very oddly, is probably the least funny one of that year. Which is odd, because other people, like some of the other writers there were... I mean, we were all trying very hard to make it a serious programme. I was trying to put a bit more comedy in occasionally, because I just thought there was a danger of it all being rather well-known.
Just trying to squeeze in a couple more questions. Anyway, sorry, this young man over here.
How's your latest Big Finish scripts coming, and what can you tell us about them?
Oh god, they're slow. I'm doing a Big Finish series. I'm doing my own series. It's about the Borgias. It's about the Doctor living through about 100 years of Italian history, just stuck there and going native and being part of that historical period. And yeah, I think we'll start liking them soon. So they have said, actually, in Jason's very, very amusing way, they actually sent me a cheque recently for them, and I never liked being paid before I'd written it because I always feel very guilty. And they know that, so they sent me a cheque to say, here you are, we've paid you now, you have to deliver something. So I really will start, it's about 4 hours on there, it's quite a long thing. So I'm doing it around other TV shows I'm writing, because it's a bit of fun. I mean, I wanted to say one last final thing for Big Finish, because without BF I never got the BBC job. And there was a worry, that we all felt this actually, Mark and Paul as well, that people would assume that we were now too grand to do it. And we all feel that Big Finish is a great fun thing, so we all wanted to come back in some way and do something again. So this is my sort of way of showing off and saying, right, I'm doing the biggest story ever, and I've never written a historical before, and I love history, so it's an attempt to do something like that. But I really there's actually not one word of it yet written. So you could mug me and mug my bag and take my bag and you wouldn't find anything there. But I must write something soon.
True enough, rifled through it already.
Yeah.
Half-eaten apple in it.
You did actually steal some stuff, didn't you? But anyway, that's... but it wasn't my Borgia stuff, so it's all right.
No, it's just some stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was a question down here. Yes, young man here.
With regards to how much control you have over your writing work, do you find you have more control with your Big Finish audios or with the television series?
Yeah, you have no control in TV. You go into a big TV show like Doctor Who and you know that you're there to provide a service for that production team. and you give them what they ask for, and you try and put as much of yourself as possible. But I was always writing Dalek under. I mean, bless them. They always said we wanted to be your episode. We wanted to be something which you feel is entirely yours. But actually, they wanted that particular type of Dalek story, and that's what I wrote for them. And you have to let go of that. When you do the audios, it sort of feels like it's a much more personal thing. And if you're doing your own theatre and radio, your own TV stuff, and my own TV at the moment is in development, then I'll have more power over that.
Thank you very much. Very entertaining panel. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed that, and there are more archive interviews to come as and when we can dig them out. Next time we're joined by Joe Ford to review the early 1970s sci-fi series Doomwatch. Until then, thanks as always for listening. Ta-ta. The Exton Moss Experiment featured Simon Exton and Ken Moss. All featured soundtracks are the property of their respective producers, and no infringement of copyright is intended. Title music was performed by the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and the programme was produced by Maverick Productions. For more information, please visit maverickproductionsuk.blogspot.com or find us on social media.